Hi, everyone. This is Paul, and you're listening to episode 10 of the Generation Latino podcast. Guys, episode 10, I cannot believe it. On episode 10, I have a very special guest and a very dear friend of mine. Her name is Jennifer Negrete, but I just call her Jen. She is a Latina, holds 2 master's degrees, and is passionate about education. She was such a pivotal part of my educational journey regarding my master's degree. Today, Jen and I are going to talk about the importance of education for the Latino community and some struggles you may come across when wanting to pursue a higher education. People kept asking me, are you going to have guests? Yes, let me first introduce myself. Then I'll start bringing like-minded individuals. I want to talk about education and what it's like to be a Latino, a Latina in education. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in education.
My name is Jen. As you said, I have worked with at-risk youth at a high school level, helping them get ready for the STAR test, which is a standardized testing here in Texas for them to actually evaluate where they're at with their education, and they have to pass that test to be able to graduate from high school. I was actually hired. I have, as you mentioned, I have 2 master's degrees. The first is in digital marketing analytics. When I got hired for that job, it was based on that degree, and none of that says algebra. But I ended up teaching science, biology to high schoolers. So, and thankfully, all of my students did pass. I'm a big advocate of education, as you know, and just trying to grow our next generation.
When I first met you, I knew right away the importance of school education just because you were always on top of things. But when you were growing up, did your parents instill education? What's the highest level of education that your parents have? My mom only has a high school diploma, but what about for you?
Yeah, same. So I am first generation graduate. My mom did have a little bit of college under her belt, but she dropped out of school to marry my dad and unfortunately never went back. And then my dad joined the Navy, but they wouldn't let him join until he had his high school diploma. So they actually took him my dad was from a suburb of Chicago, brought him to Falfurrias, Texas, so he could finish high school and then go into basic training for the Navy. High school diploma for both of them. But my mom was big on education, as well as my dad's side of the family. On my mom's side, I'm the first one to finish college with my bachelor's and 2 masters. And then hopefully in the future, I'll have my doctorates.
I know we talk about that all the time, but how far along did your mom get in her higher education?
I would probably say maybe a year, if even that.
Into her program?
Into college, yeah. She didn't get far.
Okay, so I know obviously we both went to Our Lady of the Lake University, but your mom also went there, correct?
Yeah, so that was a big reason why I went there for my second master's. I tried to go there for my undergrad as well as my first master's, but unfortunately the programs didn't work around my work schedule, or they didn't have anything in place at that point in time, because all my degrees have been online. So it's really helped to for working individuals like ourselves to have that flexibility. So the second master's was in her honor.
Did your mom ever talk about her dropping out or wanting to go back? I'm curious about that.
No, she did not. She just briefly mentioned that she didn't get to finish. After she passed away, that kind of helped me think about myself. When she passed away, I just felt like, did she ever have regrets? Not finishing school, like life regrets, not traveling more. So that kind of catapulted me to live life to the fullest, don't hold back, push your boundaries and push forward and just live life.
Like a lot of Latino families, I know moms really take a back seat. Women take a back seat to put their family, basically their needs forward. Would you say that that's what your mom did, was put your dad forward? What was her reasoning? Would you say that was it?
I would say so. I mean, I think her generation, well, one, my mom was a product of the west side of San Antonio, which is the poorest side of town. That whole area, the average income is between 11 to 13,000 annual for a household. Her being a product of the 60s, my grandparents really wanted for them to get out of the West Side and just better themselves. And so I think that was instilled in her. So anyway, by any means necessary to get out of the West Side, that's what they did. So.
And was your mom bilingual?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah. My mom is also bilingual, but my grandmother only spoke Spanish, and even that small little difference made the world of a difference.
Yeah. Both my grandparents spoke. They were bilingual. My mom was bilingual. Because my grandfather and my grandmother, they actually worked at Kelly Air Force Base
Oh
back
wow.
in the day. So you had to speak both languages to work there, and that was also during the time when, Mexicans were shamed for speaking Spanish, and and even in school, you weren't allowed to speak Spanish, otherwise you got punished. So they came from that era of
Yeah.
don't speak Spanish, but they were forced to be bilingual.
And I know for me, I wish I would have learned better Spanish. I can speak it a little, understand it, but growing up when I did, it was like you got to speak English, move forward, and see what happens. I always tell my mom or people, a family, people around me, people get confused sometimes about education and that it only means like a 4-year degree or a college degree. I tell my mom all this all the time. You can educate yourself in so many ways, whether it's books, research. You don't have to sit in a classroom. I love the classroom personally, but I want to talk about life lessons in school, out of school. What was the first lesson that you ever learned in life?
My first lesson was actually when we were living in Japan. My dad was in the Navy, and so being on base, your friend circle is very limited to whatever kids are on base. So one day there was a fence around the base, and there was an apartment complex like right next to the base. And so at that point in time, I don't know it now, but I knew enough Japanese to communicate with these kids.
Wow.
And so we ended up digging a hole underneath the fence so I could go over there and play with them. So yeah, somehow, I don't know how, my dad found out and I got spanked for it. And that was it. That was the only time I ever got spanked in my life. I learned my lesson, not to dig holes under a military base. But it stuck with me. That was when I was 6, and I still remember that lesson to this day.
I'm also someone too. I just got to learn something once and I've learned my lesson. I'm not always like going back to the well or going back to the same. And I have so many people, friends, family members that I'm like, why are you doing that again? You're dating the same type of guy. You're making the same mistake. Me, one lesson and I'm good.
And I'm not saying, like not to take risk and not to take chances, because,
Yeah.
those are valuable life lessons. We learned a lesson from those things.
Correct.
But, just realizing, like, if you do push the envelope, sometimes there's consequences, but, just realizing also you need to take accountability for your actions. That's so important. And, but yeah, push the envelope.
Yeah.
Why not? Like you said in one of your other episodes, like take up space. It's like,
Yep.
so yeah, take up space.
That is my favorite quote, like take up
I
space.
love that. I love that.
Take up space. I know so many people who are just happy to be in a space, right? So they're just happy. So they'll be in the corner. I'm like, I want to see every crack and everything in this room that I'm in. But you mentioned working with at-risk youth, and I also love working with at-risk youth. I grew up in a school where it was a Title I school, and it was what it was. I think sometimes people forget when your parents are working day and night, surviving. I think people sometimes forget the importance of education. They don't really realize how important it is. But when did you realize the importance of education? Was it in elementary, middle school, high school, or college when you realized, wow, this is important for me?
So education has always been instilled. Like I said, my mom was always a big advocate of making, it was always impressed on me that, that I was going to go to college. I didn't finish like in a timely manner like I wanted to, just due to circumstance. But even my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she bought books all the time. And, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but from that stemmed my love of books. And I think, I always, whether it was one class here, one class there, I wanted to finish school. I wanted to get that degree because, it really, so one things that really, when the light bulb really went out on the importance of education is a conversation I had with my cousin during Christmas. And, he had finished high school in 3 years. He had a scholarship to go to community college and take some courses. So I asked him, are you going to utilize that? I never had that opportunity, and I never had scholarships. I never had, any of that. And he's like, no. And I'm like, why not? Like, don't you want, just take like a computer class, something like utilize that resource. No, he's like, and at that point, my aunt was married to a doctor who had his own practice, and he had hired her sons to work in his office. So, they had that privileged platform, or not platform, but they just had that advantage. And he's like, no, he's like, I'm a manager, and, I have employees that are paid to do those things. And it's like, so I go, you would rather your employees be smarter than you. And he's like, that's why I get paid to manage them and tell them what to do. And they get paid to do that. And I was just like, wow, it just really, that to me, that was like mind blowing. And so, and then just also, like I said, my dad's side of the family, they're all educated. They're all like, they've always been highly educated. All my cousins, my aunts and uncles have gone to school. And with my last master's, I finally like leveled up and surpassed them. And so like, if I get the, but yeah, it's just like those, again, life lessons and conversations that you have with people that just really make the light bulb go off. And then, so yeah.
So when you mentioned and not to quote Eminem, right, but he has a song, Lose Yourself, where he talks about like you only get one shot to do something. And I know for me, and specifically in undergrad and especially in our master's program, I really felt like I had one shot to get this right. Did you feel that way in any parts of your journey in school, specifically higher education, where it's like, I got one shot to finish. I can't afford to fail. I can't afford to be on academic probation. I was one time, and that's, again, a lesson I learned, and I was never on it again. But how about for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wasn't a great student when I initially went. At one point, I had a 1.3 GPA, and I got kicked out of school. But when I decided, like, okay, I'm ready to go back, and I reapplied to the same school, and they did not take me back. I even wrote a letter, pleading and to take me back, and they said no, try to community college. So I went to community college, and I brought up my GPA, and at that point in time, I was working school around my job. My job was everything. And it wasn't until I took a trip to San Francisco to visit my family, and I walked into my uncle's condo, and I saw this sign that just said, be happy. Those two simple words just really had me thinking, like, I was happy with my job. I was happy, with my relationship. I had a beautiful home, or have a beautiful home. I have all these things. The only thing I don't have that wasn't making me happy was I didn't have my degree yet. And so at that point in time, I was just like, and it was because I was working school around my job, it's like, and so that I went back to San Antonio, and I quit my job, and I focused on school. And that was the best decision. It was the hardest decision because I was at that job for 17 years, and people thought I was crazy to just like come back from vacation and quit, but I did it, and there was no looking back. And Yeah, it's like I couldn't believe I quit my job either. I had never quit a job in my life, and I mean, I've quit jobs, but it's like, but when that's your livelihood, and so yeah, that was those two moments were just really what really set it off and got me on like putting the pedal to the metal to get it done.
It seems like you did sacrifice a lot of things, but what would you say that, and going back to higher education, and being in college, undergrad, grad school, what would you say was the biggest sacrifices that you made? I know for me, I made a lot in my master's program, in our master's program. There was a lot of things. I had to readjust a lot of my personal life, but what would you say were a couple of the sacrifices that you had to make?
Definitely your social life. I really felt my first master's was, it was challenging in its own way as far as like having to learn new software and platforms. And I was passionate about digital marketing just because I could see what impact it could have. But I didn't know anything about marketing other than what I thought I knew about marketing. But it came easy. It was really easy. But our second master program, I thought that was going to be a cakewalk because I mean I was coming from 17 years of management, and I've worked in the nonprofit um, field with organizations. I've worked in leadership roles, and so I thought, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. But yeah, so those sacrifices were like buckle down, no social life. Like I literally had to pick and choose what I was doing. I would allow myself one thing to do a week outside of work. My friends, no happy hours, no
Yeah,
nothing.
again, you missed Cyndi Lauper. And
Yes, yeah, I did get a T-shirt, but yeah, I that was her farewell tour too. It's like I'm never gonna have that opportunity again. But it was important to me to finish strong. To finish, I in my first master's I got a 4.0, and so I knew I could do that in my second. And especially when you're investing that time and money in
Mhm.
yourself. And I shared a quote with you when we graduated in December. I have a Facebook friend, and she's a doctor, very well known in our community, and she posted on my Facebook page and saying that education is one of the best gifts that you can give yourself that will last you a lifetime. And I never thought of education as a gift. It was just kind of like something your parents tell you you have to do, society tells you have to do. I never thought of it as a gift, and that is so true. And so now that we're talking about getting our doctors,
Mhm.
it's not that I need it. I just want it. Like, why not? We talked about the stats of the crazy low numbers of Latinas, like 20% and with a bachelor's and 8% and a master's, 1% and with a doctor's. I want to be part of that 1%.
And I'm going to see you in that 1%. You talk about a 4.0. Maintaining a 4.0 in a master's program is not easy, but we were in the same cohort. We were in the same program. We took every single class together. And I have to say that I was so impressed with your work ethic, with how you executed assignments, how you were on top of every single thing. I mean, second to none when it comes to the work ethic that you have. And I'm not easily impressed. Not to quote Shania Twain, but that don't impress me much is literally my song in life. But working side by side with you, I really saw someone who was hungry, who was ambitious, who was wanting more. Where did that come from? Has it always been like that for you? Or was it something that you learned through lessons? I just have to tell you, and I've always told you this, I mean, you are such a force of a woman, of a Latina, but where did that come from? Where does that come from? Because you inspired me to elevate my level. Tell me more about that. Where does that drive and hunger come from?
I would say one from my mom, because my mom is she was very organized. And then two, I think also working in the financial industry and having to make sure that all our I's were dotted and our T's were crossed, it made me it really coached me to become someone that paid attention to detail.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those two things really prepared me to, to be organized with the class. Like, I can give you assignments that I have from undergrad. I still have everything. And I was able to use some of that, in my first and second masters. Those just take little tidbits, or, oh, I remember this article, this would work perfectly with that. So I think I was going to say those two things. My mom was nothing, obviously, just the way she brought me up. And then my financial industry experience really helped me to become more organized. And it helps. I have folders, I have just everything organized, and just staying on top of it. Like, I printed everything out, and I would be like, okay, making a calendar of what's going on. And again, it's like, it was a lot of sacrifice too.
People don't talk about that sometimes. As you know, in our program, we had several people drop out of it.
Yeah.
I always joke that it was the Hunger Games, but it started with so many people. And as our semesters went forward, it just got less and less and less. That was scary because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be on that end of
I think what did we start with? Like, was it 19?
about 19. And we ended
Yeah.
with what?
8.
8 or 9. It was crazy. I just had to tell you that I couldn't have done it without you. But I also think that specifically in high school, and I know you've worked with high school students, middle school as well, I think mentorship is so important. And I can honestly say that you have been a mentor to me, but did you ever have any mentors at all in school?
I did not. And yeah, I had people, especially in the financial industry, that I looked up to, and that I would try to emulate some of the things that they showed, not necessarily like showed me, but just how they carried themselves. But I never per se had my own mentor then be like, okay, Jen, let's sit down and talk about things. But I do feel that's important. And I did have that opportunity mentoring through my financial industry experience. And then also with the high school students, it's just so important to have someone that's able to, share their life experiences or their professional experiences, or, give you guidance or help you set goals. A mentor is very important, I feel. And so, I try to be that person for others, and share experiences. Cause it's like, I know what I failed at, or I know what I succeeded at. So, I would share that with them. It's like, don't do like me. And, it's like, don't learn the hard way, and I would tell them, especially the high school students, cause they would, complain about school, and, tell them, it's like, this is just temporary, guys. This is temporary. But I will say, if you can find one, get yourself one.
I had a couple myself in high school, and it just really took that one person to see something in me. A lot of people didn't. They may have saw me as a troublemaker or someone who was rebellious. It just took one person to see, no, he's just a little different. And that sparked something in me to be driven and motivated. But I also think it's important too for people like yourself and myself that other kids like us see examples like us. Oh, I can be a Latino, educated, come from a Title I school, get a master's, get a 4.0. I can't harp enough about the importance of people seeing themselves. And it's hard when you're a teenager and you don't see that. And that's why I always tell people, like, I want you to see me in yourself. Like, I want you to vision, like, oh, I can be like Mr. Paul. I can be like Miss Jen. I can be that because they came from where I came from. And why do you feel, I'll speak from my experience with people that I may know in my personal life, where education seems like such a far-fetched reality. It seems like such a far distance. Oh, that's just way over there. I can't get to that. That's to the moon and back. I can't get there. Why do you think that is?
In my case, I came from two parents that, yeah, my mom did go to school, but she didn't finish it. But going to college when she did, and then, and then having her daughter go to college are completely different times. And, and she just, she didn't, neither parent, knew about resources, applying for scholarships, applying for grants. It's like they didn't know, you don't know what you don't know. And so I feel even the kids that I worked with, I had one student, he was going to be the first out of his 12 siblings and his parents and probably his grandparents to finish high school. And that demographic, a lot of them don't know the resources. I remember going through my my yearbook and seeing all the students, like the high school I ended up going to was dominantly white. And I was looking at all these kids had applied for different schools and had received different scholarships and grants. And it's just like, how did I not know about this? Like there was free money for me to go to school. It's like I had no clue, but I was never taught that. And then when I did go to college, there was no support there either. I don't know how many times I changed up my degree program, but there was no guidance on that. And if you change your degree now, all these classes that you have paid for or go out the window. Or maybe you shouldn't be taking Russian. Maybe you should be taking Spanish. It's like there was no guidance there. It was just kind of like, it was like a free for all when I initially started. And so I feel like not having that support, not knowing the resources really set me up for failure. So I feel like it's so important for us to be out there showing these kids what they can do. I would take them to colleges so they could get a glimpse of what their life could look like being in school, and then helping them apply for FAFSA and telling them, let's find you some scholarships, let's find you some grant money so that way you can, that way you can afford to go to school. Title I, a lot of those students already are able to get into these schools, but it's kind of concerning to me now with the current political climate that those programs are going to go away. And that's scary.
It's very scary. And I always tell people you're only as rich as your resources. It's scary because even filling a FAFSA for someone who doesn't know is an obstacle in themselves. My mom has never seen a FAFSA form. Are you kidding me? But it saddens me because there's such a divide when it comes to education and race and culture and background. And I myself, my first year ever in college, it was a community college, and I was on academic probation. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I just was just flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't know. I didn't have that. And I'm like, thank God I figured it out real quickly, because I would have just been a college dropout. I would have just never finished school. What I love about school is how you're able to take different classes, from languages to philosophy, ethics, all of that. But what was your favorite class that you ever took? It could be from undergrad, community college, a master's degree. What was your favorite class that you ever took, and why was it your favorite class?
I wouldn't say I had a favorite class per se, but I did have a professor, and the class was marketing. And this professor was up there on the totem pole. She was an executive marketing for Estee Lauder. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have her teaching me. But I loved how she told us to go outside of the textbook and look for resources to come, like real life resources, to bring it home and make it stick. And so I actually looked it up so it's called situated learning theory. And it's a contextual learning. This is connecting classroom topics with real world examples. And that was in my undergrad. And that really helped me going forward. So I finished my undergrad, always looking for like, okay, today we're learning about whatever, it's like business law. Okay, let me go find a real life example to really understand those concepts that we're learning in the class and apply it to real life examples, because that's going to really make it stick. And so I would tell my students that too. Go out there. If you're learning about whatever and in school today, go out there and find real life examples, because that's really going to make you remember it better. Sorry, no favorite class, but just a favorite learning tip.
Great learning tip, actually. That's a good learning tip. Speaking of learning, what is one thing you wish you could relearn?
I really wish I would have known then what I know now. And, and that's why I tell these students, this is temporary. Don't be like me, trying to, finish your degree and take forever to do it. And especially with the kids that I was working with, because again, they are entitled to free money to go to school, but there's a time limit. So I told them, don't ruin that chance. Don't waste it. That's a great opportunity. Like if I would have had free money to go to college, like, yeah, I would have been jumped all over that. But my parents didn't save for my college. I remember my dad writing a check and the check bouncing. I had to figure out, like, how am I going to pay for this class that I'm right in the middle of? And it's like, okay, so I would pay for the class and then I would have to drop out because I couldn't afford to go the following semester. But at that point, I didn't want to do student loans. Student loans were scary, especially if you're coming straight out of high school and to like have to take a loan. It's like, oh my gosh, like I just couldn't wrap my head around it, especially like you're young and you're only making minimum wage because you don't have a college degree to get a job. It's like my parents didn't know anything about student loans either, so I didn't get educated there as well. So
I know you've talked about it many times, but like financial literacy is so important. It's something that I think needs to be learned in the earliest possible when it comes to school. I do. What was the biggest lesson that you learned from failure?
Not to give up. Definitely take those as a life lesson, but don't let it define you. You really just need to take it as a life lesson and learn from it and grow from it. I think that's very important.
Learned a lot of things from failure. I've learned to maybe do better research, to better write a paper. I'm always curious to what people learn from what they failed from.
No matter the obstacle, no matter the delays that happen in your life, you just learn, adapt, and overcome them. Don't let it define you. I always think of the Aaliyah song, "Get yourself up and try again."
Try again, yes,
Get yourself up and try again. I always think of that lyric, and so when I think of failures or even when people give you constructive criticism, I love feedback. Like, it's like, give me all the feedback in the world because I know that's going to make me better and not to take it personally,
It's funny you say constructive criticism because as much as I have learned my best lessons from it, initially, and this being one of in my cohort and being a classmate, when I initially get it, it hurts me. I'm not going to lie. It hurts. I am someone who's like, let's regroup and go. But it's hard for me sometimes. If I get a bad grade or a grade I'm not happy with, I want to fix that shit today. And that's my problem. We spoke a lot about things with education and whatnot, but how do you feel about the future of education in general with what's going on in the world, with our community, with everything? How do you feel about the future?
It's really scary for me. Working with high school kids, it was very eye-opening. I feel like there's a disconnect between administration, and not just to say like our political administration, because, there's a lot of stuff. The Department of Education is being dissolved and, we keep reading those headlines, but also the administration that oversees each individual school. I saw a big disconnect between the principal and what was going on with the teachers and the students. They have no idea. They're just running the school. They're just running the business is really what it is they're just overseeing the business and just making sure it runs smoothly, but they're not really getting into the trenches with what is going on with these students, what's going on with their teachers. And so I feel like, also with everything, the school that I was at, everything was online, and the classes that were in person were just done away with. And you have teachers and nothing bad I could say about teachers, because they are doing what they need to do for their students. But I've seen teachers, I saw a Spanish teacher go teach CCMR, college readiness and, career college readiness. It's like, and this teacher literally said, I don't know anything about business. I'm a Spanish teacher. That's not my degree. I know nothing about writing resumes and social media and getting them ready to, apply for college. I don't know any of that. I feel the administration that are running these schools are putting the teachers in these roles that they shouldn't be in.
I would say, and I'll say it, setting them up for failure. I'll say it, but it's setting them up for failure. And that's why there's such a shortage with teachers, to be honest. I mean,
There's an inequality in education as well. I went to a very rich school district. Like I didn't feel rich, but it was dominantly white. It was one of the bigger and probably most lucrative school districts in San Antonio. But working with the demographic I was, it's just like, oh my gosh, like there's such a disconnect and
it's
such I really feel for the students. I feel for the families, when they're coming in looking for food pantry items or the kids don't have clothes. Like, I never had that problem when I was growing up in the school district that I was in. There's definitely an inequality. It's very scary. It really is.
Yeah, I'm afraid too of the future of education. I think it's going to be people like ourselves pushing for our community, for fellow Latinos. I always tell people, when people tell me, oh, what does education mean to you? It means opportunity, right? Like for me, it means opportunity, and opportunity means that doors are being opened. Can you tell me a couple of doors that have been open for you because of education?
My boss is a big advocate of education. My boss she is the owner of a construction property development company here in San Antonio. And, she is amazing, but she'll be the first to tell you, she's like, I surround myself with people who are smarter than me. So one, education has given me this opportunity to have this great job, get paid more than I ever have in my entire life. It's just sad, it's like to be with one job, one role for like 17 years and never make the level of money that I'm making right now. So but then just also having the opportunity to help my community and use my degrees for the betterment of our community and have that impact and just help others. It really has opened up so many doors. Education gave me an opportunity to create relationships all over the world, give me better opportunity to have a better paying job, but then too, also building relationships, not just locally, but worldwide.
I love that. Before I let you go, I have two more questions for you. First question is, what does education mean to you?
I think education, it's a key. And now I do see it as a gift. It really is. But it definitely is a key to open so many doors to so many opportunities. You can't go wrong with being educated. And I feel it also helps to open your mind to other things and other cultures and just help you see different things. You look at our cohort, for example, and all the different personalities and walks of life that we got to experience in that cohort. That really just opened your mind and get to experience different people and personalities. So yeah, education is definitely a key, and I do see it as a gift now. Thank you, Dr. Clark.
My last question, what would you tell someone who is struggling to just get back to school, who are struggling just to fill out a FAFSA, struggling just to go on a school website to take their basics? What would you tell someone who lacks the confidence in themselves because maybe their mom or dad only had a high school education, or their grandparents weren't even born here? What would you tell someone who was struggling to find that?
So there's a quote. It is, everything you ever wanted is right outside your comfort zone. And I love that quote. I always think of that. And it's true. You have to push yourself forward. And sometimes it's, if you're lacking confidence or you don't know the resources that are available to you, take up that space, like you said, and look for those resources. You just have to ask the question, really, and it could open up so many doors for you. But just push yourself forward and keep going. I can speak to that. Neither parent got a college education. They were both high school diploma, and some kids don't even have that. Their kids don't have parents with high school diplomas. But just looking for the resources, and you can start with as simple as taking a college tour, and that college tour can really just open your mind to seeing what life could look like and be like for you on a campus. And if and college isn't for everybody, but there are also trade schools, and that's okay. It's like whatever, but just push yourself forward, push yourself outside of your comfort zone, because anything you ever wanted, what you want your life to look like, is right outside your comfort zone. You just have to be brave enough to just reach out and grab it.
I totally agree with you. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that was the whole premise of this episode of this podcast, specifically for Latinos or anyone who is struggling. My goal is to help people get motivated when there's no resources. I always joke, like, it's so great to be motivated when everything's going well, when everything's going according to the plan that you want. But it's when you don't have resources, when you don't have the motivation, when you don't have maybe the people around you, how do you continue to stay motivated? But I think what you just said really hit it on the nail. But before I go, I really want to thank you again for not just being my first guest on my podcast, but for also being a good friend, a good mentor. And I can honestly say that I wouldn't have had my master's degree if it wasn't for you. You truly helped me with some really low times in my life, professionally, personally. Thank you. I'm not just saying that because you're here, but you were on the phone with me many times when I wanted to jump off the ledge, when I said, Jen, I can't do this anymore. My bandwidth is enough. I work and school and life and all of that. But I want to thank you so very much for being a part of this journey with me.
Oh, thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. And I'm so honored to be here. And hopefully we can inspire some more Latinos, and especially Latinas, sorry guys, but to go forward. I would love to see those numbers go up.
I'm going to have you on here when you complete your doctorate. All right, Jen, thank you so much, love. I will talk to you later.